Welcome to HR's Best Friend, our new podcast for HR professionals and business leaders who want to make sure they stay compliant, don't get in trouble, and keep their employees happy. Don't worry, Fired Up will be back and revamped. Fired Up is our podcast that covers the employee side of employment law. D. Scott Crook is the one and only Utah employment lawyer. He's consistently listed in Rocky Mountain Super Lawyers and Best Lawyers in America. He is the managing partner of Crook Legal Group. He also once had a crush on his kindergarten teacher. Scott is only licensed to practice law in Utah and Idaho. He is not giving specific legal advice. This shouldn't be construed as legal advice for your problem. If you need specific legal advice, please go to an attorney. Scott is an attorney. We'll leave it at that. So, HR's Best Friend. We're going to have several different segments each episode. Today, we're going to be breaking down an episode of The Office called Booze Cruise. We'll also be answering some Reddit questions that HR professionals have. And we'll be answering a frequently asked question that Scott gets from his clients frequently. Welcome in, Scott, or as I should say, Dad. How are you?
I'm good. And can I say that this adventure of talking about The Office just makes me think about when I first saw The Office and I couldn't stand it because I would cringe and think, people think this is a joke, but this stuff really happens. And so it took me a while before I started watching it and enjoying it, but I became an Office fan. So,
Well, good. So, the Booze Cruise episode. So, I'm pulling up the plot breakdown. It was line by line. Just some Office history. The Booze Cruise is the 11th episode of the second season of The Office. It aired January 5th, 2006. So, here's how the episode opens. Dwight is mad because Jim has put all of his possessions in a vending machine. So, Dad, is there anything to talk about with just that cold open?
well,
You
I
didn't get in trouble for that.
so the yeah, well, we have to talk about two or three different things, right? There is the legal problem. In other words, whether anything could be could be construed as breaking the law, or if there's you know a legal principle that has been potentially violated. And then there are issues that everybody has to consider as an employer, and especially as a resources person for an employer. So it's I'm going to be answering sort of in that order. So the first question, the first thing is there a legal impediment to Jim doing what he's doing? Well, the fact is there's nothing that is illegal about um, putting somebody's stuff in a vending machine as it relates to employment law. Now, Dwight may have some personal, claims against Jim for stealing his stuff, which is it's called conversion in Utah, but we won't get into that. But from an employment perspective, does the employer have potential liability? No, there can be certain circumstances where there might be, and that is if Jim was doing it because he was retaliating against Dwight um, for reporting that he had um, sexually harassed somebody or done something illegal. And in some instances in Utah, if you report on somebody for violating the law, you could have a claim. So that can be considered as retaliation. In that circumstance, you might have a legal claim. But
Okay.
outside of that situation, there's probably no legal claim against the employer.
Okay. So that's the cold open. Surprising amount of analysis. just from
Well, I
trending
haven't
issues.
even got to the second or third cards, which is it a good idea? Obviously, no. Should the employer do something about it? Obviously, yes. You probably should tell Jim to stop doing that kind of stuff. But and you might be able to write him up and do anything. But from a legal perspective, there's nothing really illegal about it.
Okay. Well, so here's how the plot unfolds. So Michael sends out a vague memo telling the staff to pack a number of random items, including a swimsuit, a toothbrush, a rubber-soled shoes, and a ski mask, in in preparation for the company's first quarter leadership training trip. The surprise trip turns out to be a booze cruise, and the staff is not happy. It's January. They're in Pennsylvania, so uh, so let's see. So Michael tells everyone that he is the captain, but when they arrive on the boat, Michael immediately feels threatened by the ship's actual captain, who's Captain Jack, who I remember is actually played by Rob Riggle. So let's see. Okay, so as the episode goes on, the whole office goes to the booze cruise. For those that don't know, so Roy is a warehouse worker, and he is engaged to Pam, the office secretary. As the night goes on, Roy gets fairly drunk, and several employees get quite drunk. Dad, you just told me that you've had several clients ask you questions lately about serving alcohol. So maybe this would be a good part to talk about if there are any issues there.
Yeah. So, in my opinion,
Even though they're outside of the office, like they're on a ship.
Right, and so really that makes no difference in the office analysis here, and that is because Michael sent a memo to everybody, said they had to come, and it was it was a required event. And so to the extent, even if it's outside of the office, the idea is, and this happens with other employers, like, well, we're going to do training, or we're going to this is something you have to attend because we want you to become closer to your coworkers, and we want to train you on leadership and stuff. And um so it wouldn't make any difference. This is like serving alcohol in the office, which in many office episodes they do. And so it's not unusual in that particular TV show that they're serving alcohol at events, even when they're not office events. Anyway, so I I do have a lot of employers who will have in their they'll have a firm party, they'll have an office party, or they'll have an event that they're holding during business hours, like at Christmas time. Maybe they'll have a Christmas luncheon, and they expect all of the employees to come. Now, there's those scenarios where it is an employer event. It's definitely an event because employees have to go, right? And it's always, in my opinion, a bad idea to serve alcohol as an employer ever. Um, and that's simply because if you want to guarantee the perfect scenario to create all kinds of liability, you've just done it. Because the reason why people drink is manifest or manifold. There are all kinds of reasons that people like to drink, but there is one thing that's for sure: alcohol has an impact on how people act. Some people become more loose, other people become more angry, and it doesn't make sense to me why you would put into an already tense atmosphere sometimes alcohol, because you're almost guaranteed to create a sexual harassment case, or you may have some workplace violence issues. And so I always recommend to my clients, even though a lot of them don't like to hear it, that they should not have alcohol at any employee event. And that includes non-mandatory meetings like after hours, um, work parties. A lot of times they'll go, well, it's after hours. We're just sponsoring it. It's not really required. So what does it matter? Well, I'll tell you what it matters is if you have a supervisor who gets a little drunk and he happens to think that the new receptionist is really, you know, attracted to him, and he goes after her, you've created a sexual harassment environment. It doesn't matter that it's after hours, because you put them in this position. She could feel awkward about how he's approaching her, etc. So it really doesn't matter. So my recommendation is to never allow any alcohol at any party where an employer is sponsoring it or asking people to go. And that seems, people don't like that. I think it's, just a lawyer being extra conservative, but he is a lawyer and he is being conservative, because that's where you get lots of litigation arises out of these parties where alcohol is served.
Okay. That's very good. Well, let's move on to Reddit questions. There are all kinds of
The Reddit section. I can't wait.
Yeah, there's lots of fun Reddit questions that HR professionals post in here. It's in our human resources. So there's lots of good stuff. So here's one. This one's titled "Manager Used Racial Slur." And it says, "I'm investigating, but I'm sure management won't fire the guy after he said it in front of 2 employees." The racial slur this person means. "He also told our recruiter he didn't want to hire any black people or women." And the question is, how would you advise management to take the proper course of action here?
Okay, so believe it or not, there are still places where people do things like this. It seems incredible to me, but it does happen. And obviously, I don't know how accurate Reddit is on reporting what actually happened, but to the extent that any supervisor says to anybody, "I don't want to hire a black person or an Asian or anything," that's a real problem. And if you were to make a decision, now I have to make some caveats here. Okay, so in Utah, no anti-discrimination statute applies to an employer, a private employer. And I'll make it's important to make this distinction, unless they employ more than 15 people. So in Utah, it's not illegal. That, in fact, would not be illegal in Utah if it were an employer who had less than 15 employees. Whether it's illegal or not doesn't mean whether it's right or not. It just it's just whether it's legal or not. Now, public employers are bound by the anti-discrimination statutes and by the Constitution that has the Equal Protection Clause, so they can't discriminate. No matter if they only have 3 employees. But in any event, if you have a supervisor or managers doing that, it is fair to say you should not keep them in a management or a supervisory position. Because if they've said it, and then later you have interviews, and the only people who are hired are white people or the preferred race, that's a bad idea.
So in this person's particular instance, well, obviously, so let's say that management doesn't want to do anything about it. Then what do you do as the HR person?
Well, um, as an HR person in Utah, you have no under the anti-discrimination statutes in Utah, you have no individual liability, which means as an HR person, you don't have to worry that you're going to get personally sued for this. However, if the management refuses to do anything about it, you probably should put in writing um, your disagreement with it. Um, Encourage the managers to follow the direction that you gave, and then document it so that you can protect yourself. The problem is if you do that, of course, the employer is gonna, if an employee that is discoverable information in litigation, so it could really harm the employer if it's produced during litigation, which it probably should be, depending on um, the questions that are asked. And I would push for them to do it, and I would suggest that they contact their attorneys, because the attorney who knows what he's doing, or what she's doing, will give the same advice. Now, that doesn't mean that people will follow it, and if they don't, then you just have to worry that the employer may go out of business if they get sued by the right person. Um, Also, now I want to mention, and maybe we're not ready for that, the question about racial slurs and that sort of thing, because I think that's different, and we should probably talk about that separately.
Okay, let's talk about that one then, with the specifically the racial slur.
Okay, so of course, no one should be saying racial slurs or anything bigoted in an office. It's just not a good practice. Um, but it is not enough that a racial slur is someone uses a racial slur once or twice to create any liability. Most judges that have heard those cases have said, "Hey, that doesn't create a hostile work environment, and would not constitute an actionable claim." However, it could turn into that if other things happened. There are stories of people using racial epithets, tying nooses, putting up little, other racial stuff that can, combined with other stuff, can create a hostile work environment. But one or two isolated uses of a racial epithet will not get you, will not create liability. Now, as an HR person, you should make sure that that person is disciplined for it. And you may want to terminate that person's employment, but you don't really have to worry about liability from it, although you could get sued because of it.
Okay, quick pivot. Our third segment of today will be Scott's quick tips for employers. Scott, what is your quick tip for today?
Well, today I would suggest that employers in Utah, um, the Utah legislature only meets in session once a year, and generally employment law, any statute that is passed in Utah does not become effective until May. Now, that was 4 months ago, but a lot of times people don't check to see if there's any new legislation that's out there. And so my quick tip is that in the beginning, in Utah, starting in about March or April, you should probably look at a legislative summary that tells you laws that have been changed with respect to employment issues, and then when you review them, see if any of them might cause you concern, and if they do, then contact your attorney and have a discussion with your attorney about the potential impact that it could have on your place of employment. A lot of times, the summaries are not I mean, they're very helpful, but they're not super clear about what applies to, what employers. And so it would be good to have a discussion with your lawyer about April or March or April of any year to anticipate new laws that may come in and affect you. The other thing to do is to closely watch, similar to this, is to keep your eye on developments that happen with Department of Labor, because they're often suggesting new regulations. And in fact, in the last couple of in the last few weeks, there have been a couple that have been pretty significant. One is the Department of Labor is suggesting an increase in the salary limit to be considered exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that can have a huge impact on employers. And also, the EEOC released some proposed regulations that are intended to help in understanding the pregnancy discrimination, fairness, and I'll get it right. The pregnancy discrimination, and so you should probably look at those. Those have a significant impact on what you do in your with your employer. So I would suggest doing that.
Okay. Well, thank you. We've got a
no problem. This is fun.
Yep.
I hope we can be helpful, and hopefully in the future. And I think we're planning on in the future, when we're doing this, maybe having some people write in some questions and we can answer them. And also we may have some guests who will be talking to us.
Yes. Lots of fun stuff in the future. All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you.